Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Sermon, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today with me on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we will be taking different life cycles and exploring them financially and emotionally, because personal finances are usually not about the money. Rather, they are about the emotions associated with your finances. Our goal is to look at how to prepare for these life cycles and thrive on the other side. Although we might have a theme for each show, I can assure you the financial strategies we talk about are applicable to many other situations as well that you might be facing. Although we may be fairly general in our discussion, I'd love to hear from you and make it more personal and more relevant. So please do call in, or you can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Going solo means different things to different people. It can mean a divorce. It can mean losing a loved one, perpetual bachelorhood, and I'm sure there are a myriad of other ways to look at it as well. We plan on covering all of these and more, just not on today's show. So please do tune in to other shows in the future, and we will cover these topics. And please share your thoughts for future topics that you would like to learn more about. Today, we're going to focus mostly on divorce. How do we prepare for it? How do we thrive beyond? And more specifically, working with a divorce coach. We are navigating, as everybody knows, unprecedented times, and understanding how a divorce might impact your life today, during the process, and even beyond is so vitally important. My guest today has taken personal experiences, the trials and challenges of a divorce, and devoted herself to helping others heal and move forward. Tara Eisenhard is a divorce coach, a speaker, and the author of the book, The D Word, Divorce Through a Child's Eye. Welcome, Tara. It's so good to have you on the show. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much, Hirsch. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. And you and I, we've known each other for a while now, and I know from personal experience and from interacting with you that personal experiences are a major motivator in both our careers. Can you share how you became a divorce coach, as I think it highlights the passion you have behind what you do?
Absolutely. So that story actually starts a very long time ago. It goes all the way back to about 2 weeks before my 13th birthday, when I overheard my parents arguing. And in that argument, they decided that they wanted to no longer be married. And there's a whole story that goes along with that. Long story short, I thought in that moment that my life was over. I thought that everything was going to be terrible from then on out. I was worried that I was going to be one of those, children of divorce, that I was going to fall into drugs and I was going to flunk out of school. And it sounds so silly now because none of that happened. And what did happen was that things actually got a lot better for my family. That when my parents didn't have to live under the same roof anymore, they were able to repair the parts of their relationship that did work. They were able to cooperatively co-parent me and my sister. Eventually, they even became friends again. And so as a result of that divorce, my life improved. My parents' relationship improved. My relationships with each of my parents improved. As my parents got new partners, my family grew. I had more people around me who loved me, supported me, could help me with my homework. Overall, it was a really positive experience. And then I grew up and I got married, and I married somebody that I probably shouldn't have married. But it was a wonderful learning experience and I wouldn't take it back. But we decided to get divorced when we realized it wasn't working. And having the experience that I did, watching my parents go through that process, the way that they handled it, my ex-husband and I had a really cooperative divorce too. We were able to, come together to talk things through. It was a relief to realize that we were both so unhappy, and to admit that and really be honest for the first time. And so I was really happy to be getting divorced. And I was excited to start this new chapter. Like I said, we had a cooperative process, but unfortunately, I realized at that moment at that point, how unusual I am as a human being. Because when I told people that I was getting divorced, nobody was happy for me. Nobody congratulated me. Everybody was either really angry for me or they were very sad for me. And they gave me all kinds of advice and they told me to call lawyers. And, they opened their arms and expected me to start crying. And I did not understand what was wrong with the rest of the world. And so I started to do some research, and I spent in the years after I got divorced, I started dating a divorced dad. I started to realize, again, what an anomaly I am. And so I started to do some research. I started to, read some books and look into what kind of resources are available for people. I started to talk to people more about their divorces. And I realized that we have kind of a screwed up way of approaching this. There's a lot of just, societal stuff that prevents people from having a productive process.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to change it. I knew better. I knew better from my own personal experience. I knew that divorce didn't have to be this horrible, messy, expensive thing that damages families and children forever. And I wanted to find a way to influence that conversation and change the outcome. And one day on Twitter, I found a woman who was a divorce coach, and I'd never heard of such a thing. And I knew that was it. That was for me. And so here I am.
Well, firstly, I'm glad your life didn't fall into drugs and disrepair. And I agree in so much of what you just said, and I'll just kind of wrap it up. And the process is built in a very adversarial manner in general. I'm not saying all practitioners work in this way, obviously, but it is built with that adversary kind of distrust built into it. And that's unfortunate. And you and I have spoken a lot offline, especially relating to building your professional team. And I think many people are confused about building this professional team when they're preparing for a divorce. And, we have said offline, and it's worth repeating, you can add a lot of people to your process and improve the outcome and lower your costs. And some of the players, if I can call them that, are pretty self-evident. Your attorney does the legal stuff, your financial expert does the finance stuff, but there's several other players in there. And one of the big, I think, maybe misconceptions is the way to put it, or misunderstandings. So I'm just going to ask you, is a divorce coach like a therapist?
So that's an excellent question, and I get that question a lot. The answer is yes, but no. So for me, I like to say that divorce is a human process with a legal document attached to it. Right. I work on the human side of it, just like a therapist does. I don't touch any of the legal things. However, coaching is a directional process and therapy is a deep one. So there's a great analogy. If you have a suitcase and you take your suitcase to a therapist, the therapist is going to sit down with you, open up that suitcase, look at what's in there. What did you pack? Did you pack appropriately? Could you create more room? Do you need to take some things out of the suitcase? And if you take that suitcase to a coach, the coach is going to say, all right, I see your bags are packed. Where is it that you want to go? And let's talk about the plane schedules, the train schedules, the bus schedules, and talk about the best way for you to get there.
I like that analogy. It helps you focus, which in the time of divorce and emotion, obviously, your thought process isn't at its peak, and having somebody to help and guide you and refocus you, maybe sometimes even, I think becomes so important as well. So what kind of training do you need to become a divorce coach?
So that's also a really good question, because divorce coaching is not a highly regulated field. It's not a licensed thing at a state or a federal level. So there's a lot of different programs out there. So personally, what I did when I found that woman on Twitter several years ago, this was back in 2010, she was a pioneer in divorce coaching, and she was offering training. So I went and I did a training program with her. Now there's also CDC has a certified divorce coach training. There's a couple other entities out there that sort of have their own programs. So I did that one with her. That was the first thing that I did. I've also done a certified divorce specialist program through the National Association of Divorce Professionals. In addition to that, I've done some other things. I've taken courses in parenting. I've done some of the be more spiritual programs about divorce, just to kind of get some information about, or some understanding about, how it's approached in that manner. And I'm also a trained mediator. I'm trained in general mediation, basic mediation, family mediation, group mediation. And so I've done a lot of different trainings along those lines as well. But not all divorce coaches take the same path. Some coaches used to be attorneys, and they work very differently given their background.
Right. So going through a divorce has many challenging areas, and often, people don't even know what they're going to come up against. What kinds of issues do you generally help people work through?
Sure. So like I said, some divorce coaches used to be attorneys, and so they do have a different approach. There are divorce coaches out there that, because of their legal background, they can help coach on the legal side of things, but I don't do that. Like I said, I am much more focused on the human side of things. So some of the things that I work with my clients on are things like communication, conflict, trying to just sort of wrap their heads around their new relationship with their ex, how to create that new relationship, how to communicate clearly, how to set appropriate boundaries, how to take care of themselves, things like that, just really, it's like your world turns upside down. And so I help people to just kind of find some steady ground, ask some of those questions so that they can start to hear their own voice. It's really hard to hear your own voice when you're getting divorced, because everybody else is talking to you. So I help people to tune in that, back to that suitcase analogy. I help them figure out where it is that they want to go. And then we talk about the best ways to get them there.
And I think there's so much doubt often that comes through, that you're not always sure you want to listen to your own voice, as well as, I can talk from experience of my own, as well as through clients, when, they're not sure what it's going to look like sometimes at the end, and being able to have somebody walk you through and explore what you want and how you want it to look, I think becomes so different for you as you go through the process and beyond, which is so important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned earlier, or as we mentioned earlier, these are just such unprecedented times that we're living in. And the only analogy that I have of our lives right now is like we're living a live game of chutes and ladders. You can go up to a restaurant. No, sorry, you landed on the chutes. You got to go home. They closed for 2 weeks till things close down. And we in flux. And with all these changes we're experiencing, I think it makes it that much harder sometimes to really have the consistency that we like and sometimes thrive in our lives. So working with people obviously is very important. Them understanding how they can interact with you and work with you. Share a little bit, how do you work with people? Do they meet with you in person? What is that dynamic like?
Mm-hmm. So I've actually been working remotely for about the past 3.5, 4 years or so. I realized, I live in a very conservative area, I guess you could say. And so initially, when I really got serious about my business, I rented an office and I advertised locally. And then I realized that, not everybody here is ready for me. What I do is just a little different. And so I've actually been working remotely for several years now. I have clients, all over the world at this point. And I work with people on, on phone or video conference. I always give people a choice if they want to work with me one-on-one. Some other things that I do is actually some online courses. Either through email or web-based with a Facebook group hub or on an online learning platform. So I have a lot of different ways that I do work with people, and working remotely, allowing people to interact with me through the comfort of their own home, and whether they want to work one-on-one with me or they just want a little bit of help and kind of do their own thing, that's available too.
So I'm imagining people in the middle of a process working with you. I'm thinking kind of February, March time right now. Their lives are in flux with being in the middle of a divorce, and you had some consistency and they didn't have to change that piece or scramble to figure out, how am I going to work with Tara? Because obviously they don't want something else to change in addition to everything else that's changing. So I think that's wonderful. And you mentioned being able to work with people across the globe, which as well I think is enormous as well. So what is it about divorce that is so hard? And I'm not going to say can we make it easy, but how do we what are some steps maybe that people can work through and use to make it less hard, I think is maybe the better way to put that than easy. So
yeah. So I think, my philosophy, my theory is that the number one reason that divorce is so hard, aside from the fact that it's just hard, we need to recognize the fact that it's a hard process to go through because it's, it represents the ending of something. It's the death of a dream. People get married and they never thought that they were going to be in this position. So it's just naturally a difficult process. However, as a culture, I think we make that a lot worse by the fact that we really, we prize marriage and we despise divorce. When people get married, there's structure around that. There's a, bridal shower, there's a bachelor party, there's a wedding, there's a reception, there's celebration, there's recognition. And we do this for all kinds of other life events. If you think, we have birthday parties and we have bar mitzvahs and we have weddings, like I said, we have retirement celebrations, we have funerals when people pass away. And when it comes to divorce, we have absolutely nothing. We have nothing except this, prescription to get a good lawyer and go to war. We think of it as a terrible thing. We think that people who go through divorce have failed. People who go through divorce think that they've failed. And so I think that's the number one thing that really toxifies the process, is that there's so much shame. It really sets people up for a very negative downward spiral in many cases, because when you have a lot of shame, when you feel really bad, you want to get rid of it. So you blame somebody, people blame their ex, and then their ex feels bad and they blame them back. And then they both get lawyers and they, get their allies on their sides and they go to war and they fight it out and everybody wants to win. And that's just not what this process is about. And so I think we can make it a little bit better, a little bit easier if we, the collective we, but especially people who are in the process, make a little bit of a shift in mindset. I like to say that divorce isn't so much about dissolution as it is about evolution. This is an evolution of a relationship. It's an evolution of a family. It's not an excuse to just go to war and get everything. It's just a change. It's something that can be handled in a collaborative manner. The more people are willing to talk to each other through this process, the less they're going to spend on their legal fees. The more they're willing to nurture themselves and do what they need to do to help themselves and to help their family move forward in a productive manner, to get that education, to get that assistance from the different professionals and things like that, it's going to be a better process. It's probably going to be a less expensive process. It's going to be a more holistic process with a better outcome in the end for everybody involved.
So a couple things, what you were saying there, we have a phrase, a failed marriage, but I love that evolution description. I think that was so important. And what you said about war as well, I had a friend, before I got divorced, I had a friend who went through a miserable experience with his divorce. And I went out for drinks with him. We were talking. I told him we were getting divorced. And the first thing he said to me is, "You are now at war and she is your enemy." And I am so grateful I did not take that approach. I think it would have made a hard situation significantly worse. And we've spoken on and off the show, you and I, about how this is a divorce. When I say this, is the first chapter in the rest of your life. It's really not the last chapter in this part of your life. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to keep that in mind, because you may go to war, so to speak, but you're going to ruin and obliterate any hope of a happy and collaborative way of co-parenting as you go forward. Or what is the impression and lessons you're teaching your kids, whatever it might be. So I love that description of the evolution and the idea that I'm not saying we have to celebrate that things didn't work out, but at least celebrate, that we as people can grow from this and have an opportunity from it as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you quickly to share how people can get a hold of you then we're going to take a quick break. But I know it's been flashing on the screen, but for those that are listening as opposed to watching, how do they get a hold of you?
So they can get a hold of me. Best way is really through my website. It's taraeisenhard.com. Or also I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. So you can hit me up on any of those social channels too.
Great. And we're going to take a quick break to pay some bills. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Financial Wellness Hour. This is Hirsch Sermon, your host, and we are on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, and I am happy to have you here with me. Today's guest is Tara Eisenhard, a divorce coach, speaker, and author of the book, The D Word, and I am very happy to have you on. We've been speaking a little bit about the difficulties and challenges of going through a divorce and how a divorce coach can help you plan your roadmap, maybe is one way to put it, and look forward, which sometimes is such a difficult thing to do during a divorce. I'm going to ask, since we're talking about roadmap planning, all of that, can you share a couple tips that you have for people, whether they're approaching or maybe going through a divorce right now?
Yeah, so couple tips for people who are on that path. Number one is to accept the fact, and number two is to really be honest. These are two really difficult things. These two factors can really take people, into a bad place if they're not willing to be honest and to have that acceptance. I was, quick personal story. The night that my husband came home, ex-husband came home and said that he thinks that we should separate, I was livid. I was so angry. He had been talking to other people about our relationship. We were not off to a very good start. And he said to me, "Isn't this what you want? Don't you hate me?"
Wow.
And in that moment, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I said to him, "Yeah, I do hate you." And in that brutal honesty, when I said to my husband that I hated him, as soon as I had said the words, I could stop hating him because there was such a relief. We came to that acceptance. We were honest with each other. And when you get to that point, the solutions start to come to light and the path forward becomes very, very clear. To say, "Hey, this isn't working. What can we do to change it?" Rather than, "You're wrong and I'm going to tell you why and we're going to go to war."
And I think, whether you want it, whether you don't, I think in some way you go through those stages of grief. And if you're the person that filed or wants the divorce up front, I think sometimes you've thought about this for 6 months or a year or however long it might be, that you emotionally are that much further ahead with acceptance than the person who it's kind of just been sprung upon. And unfortunately, sometimes people don't want the divorce, but it's kind of going to happen anyway. And it's a hard thing to accept. But I think once you accept, you can really start to organize your life as to what's going to happen. And you can try therapy, couples therapy, you can try a lot of things, but once it's in motion, it doesn't often turn around where people stop. It's almost always going to go through. And the average divorce is probably 10 to 11 months is what I've read. It gives you time to get there, but you really do have to accept what's going on to be able to move forward. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck back there. This person's moving forward. And that in itself, sometimes I think, can create a lot of resentment around what's going on. And the more you're stuck, I think the more damage to yourself you can do, whether it's financially, whether it's emotional, whether it's with your kids and kind of hanging on to that ankle as they walk away. So I think being able to accept, as hard as it can be, you've kind of got to bite the bullet sometimes and just say, "This is what's happening. This is it." I think that's very true.
And most people don't want to be married to somebody who doesn't want to be married to them.
That is
So
true.
you
I
can
think
hold
it takes
that.
a little time to get to
Mhm.
sometimes,
Yeah.
but
And you
we
can say that you don't want the divorce, but at the same time, do you
right.
want that kind of a marriage?
Well, and I've asked a client that before. I've said, because there have been clients that I've worked with who are not the ones that are asking for it, and I've said to them, envision your life if you decide to stay together with a man who doesn't want to be with you. Is that really who you want to be with?
Mhm.
And I think that was a bit of a light bulb to the two. I can think of two people that I've said that to, and I was, in a gentle way.
Mhm.
Um, it is important to be gentle and sensitive, but I don't think anyone wants to be with somebody that doesn't want them back. Everybody wants to
Mhm.
feel valued and feel wanted. So yeah, I think that's a realization, and maybe that's the way to come to it, is understanding that versus kind of through sheer logic. Maybe
Mhm.
I don't know. So they say everyone has a book in them, and the reality is, however, very few people actually put the enormous effort into writing that book. You've done that, and
Mhm.
that's a huge accomplishment in itself. And the other piece is, it's on such an enormously important topic. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Sure. So my book is called The D Word: Divorce Through a Child's Eyes. I started writing it one day. I've been writing books since I was in about fifth grade, but I
Mm,
had never finished one before this, so this was a big deal. One day I just started writing this story, and I had always been a real fan of Judy Blume's stories and her young adult novels. And I started to write this story about a 12-year-old girl whose parents were getting divorced, and was really thinking about all the Judy Blume books that I had read. And she also wrote one about a girl whose parents are getting divorced. I'm writing the story from this girl's perspective. What I did was I kind of put myself into that position
right,
again and reimagined my experience if my parents had had a more traditional divorce. And and so this girl's parents are not, they're not being nice to each other. She's really caught in the middle. It's one of those kinds of things. And I got about a chapter and a half or so into it, and I really thought that I was writing for that 12-year-old girl. And it occurred to me that it was really important that parents read this book. And I decided that I wanted this to be really, a story for children and a tool for parents, because one of the problems that comes about in this process is that human beings are very selfish creatures. We think that everybody else sees the world the same way that we do. And it's especially prevalent in divorce situations where parents assume that, I'm here and my kids live with me, and so they must hate my ex as much as I do.
right.
Um, and it's just not true. Kids have a completely different view of that, and we all know that when we talk about it. But there's an unconscious kind of assumption that's made. And I wanted to tell this story, and I wanted parents to see it, and I wanted it to be something that people can talk to their kids about, where mom and dad and their young adult children, like 9 and above, read this book and can have some conversations about some of the topics that arise in it, and use it to move their family forward.
So yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing that up, and being able to put yourself back into that character, so to speak. I remember the night that we told our children, and my son was young. My daughters were a little bit older, but my son was young, and he asked, "Can I speak to you?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And I really wasn't prepared, like what kind of questions would our kids ask. And he said, "Are you and mommy going to be divorced on us?"
Mm.
And I was like, wow, I really wasn't prepared for that one. And I said, we will always be your mom and your dad. We will always be, so to speak, married in that way to help you and be a partnership for our kids. The rest of our relationship, we are going to be divorced. But from a kid's perspective, we will always be your parents. We'll always be there for you, and we'll always be, so to speak, married. And we're not divorcing as your parents. We'll always be your parents. That was hugely insightful to me in how to interact with my kids, I guess.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you have any thoughts or how to speak to kids, or, having written a book from the kids' perspective? Are there, things that I'm thinking you wrote it in one character, you lived it in another? Anything that you want to share about that? I'm not sure if there's anything there.
Yeah. So one thing that's just I've found can be really powerful is to create some space between parents and children to have some kind of a family meeting, whether mom and dad are able to be together for that kind of thing, or it's an individual thing. Maybe once a week, it's Thursday night at 6 o'clock. We're just going to sit down. We're having a quick family meeting, and everybody's going to check in on these things, just to give that space for kids to be able to talk about that kind of stuff. So I was 13 when my parents got divorced, and I knew enough to know that they had their own problems and that they were really stressed out. And so I kept a lot of things to myself. So that was something that I felt that, I was kind of missing out on, was this space to just, and in my case, my parents weren't at war with each other. They didn't want me to choose sides or anything like that. But there was just, I kept a lot to myself. I took a lot on for myself. I took care of myself. I didn't give them the opportunity to be my parents. And so I think it's important to kind of create a container for those conversations and that connection to take place.
That's interesting. I think sometimes, especially if it's contentious, we forget about the kids' emotions because we wrapped up in ours. And I'm saying ours in the royal we, so to speak. I think that's important. And just a thought on, you said you'd written a few books. Is there any particular reason this one went all the way through? I think I know the answer. But
So I think it's really just passion. Which is an interesting thing. Just, kind of a side note. I've also started a lot of hobbies throughout my life. I spent a couple weeks where I was like spinning wool, and a couple months where I was making soap, and those things didn't take either. But I have been extremely passionate about divorce for about 14 years now. This is one that just, hasn't let go of me, and I can write about divorce all day.
Well, I'll tell you, you do have this passion, and you went through this experience that I think so many other people can go through if they are able to. It would change their life, and kind of having the mission that you do is enormously important as well. So I commend you on that significantly. There are many people, obviously, with COVID, and even before, I think the younger generations are almost being trained in this, or conditioned into kind of being a DIYer, a do-it-yourselfer, or wanting to self-educate or do everything online. And you had mentioned a little bit earlier, you've got several opportunities for them. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your online programs, or email, or across the globe? I know there's one going on now with kind of a co-presenter in England, I believe. So can you share a little bit about those opportunities as well?
Absolutely. So I have a few things that I do on my own. One is a monthly email program to help people who are moving on after being cheated in their previous relationship. Whether or not they were married, it doesn't matter. That kind of betrayal it just hurts. A lot of times people, share children with somebody who cheated on them, or they have to co-parent with an affair partner. So I have a monthly email program that addresses that. I have an online course called the Good Divorce Principles, walking people through some things that can help them to have a good divorce, where good stands for goals, observation, options, and dignity. And I am doing one program right now. I'm just kicked off yesterday, actually, and it's still open. If anybody wants to join, they can go to my website and click the link. It is Sad to Super for single parents. So this is a 6-week program that I'm actually running with Zina Arinzi. She is a divorce coach in London, and we've been collaborating for a couple of years now. And then also, am I allowed to talk about it, Hirsch? The program that we've done together?
Yeah, sure, why not? that. I'll let you bring it up.
So we did a series of webinars earlier this year, and we're putting together an online program as well to deal with feelings and finances. So this is the emotional as well as the practical numbers game to help people get through divorce. With sort of, you could say, both sides of the brain, right? That's the left and the right brain.
Right. And being a little biased, I will say I think it's come together extremely nicely, that program. I do think the more you prepare and understand ahead of time, the better it is for you, especially making decisions, so to speak, under fire, using your war analogy. The more that you've thought through and understand ahead of time, the better it will be for you, for sure. Mm-hmm. I agree. So talking about that, I'm going to ask you just to quickly share with some people or everybody how to get a hold of you, because as you said, it's coming up the one program if they're interested in that. So quickly, if you can share your information again. I see it scrolling, but it's always nice to hear it as well.
Absolutely. So I am Tara Eisenhard. So it's taraeisenhard.com. You can also look for me on Facebook, Tara Eisenhard Divorce Coach. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me at any of those places. The link to my programs are, available in some form or another at all of those locations. And
a quick thought that I'm having now. So there's so much that we talk about in preparing and going through the divorce. It's very impactful, and obviously for most people, hopefully they only go through it, if they go through it, only once. And it's so unfamiliar, which means they need that preparation and they need that support all the way through. But as we mentioned earlier, this divorce is really the first chapter in the rest of your life, not the last chapter in this one. Can you share a little bit about how you help people who they've gone through everything, it's finalized, but you can't just say, oh, okay, great, we're done. Talk a little bit about some of the things you might help them with beyond divorce as well, if you would.
Absolutely. So one thing that I love to say that people don't always love to hear is that you never stop being divorced. So I'm happily remarried. I'm still divorced. I have t-shirts that say that I'm divorced. I have a face mask for COVID that says divorced on it. I love being divorced, and those lessons stick with you. You don't stop being divorced, especially if you still have children. And so some of those things that come up after the fact, you got the decree, and people seem to think, oh, I guess, okay, it's done, it's over. But it's not over. People have co-parenting issues. Their children are growing and changing. There's conflicts. There's conflicts with, between exes. There's conflicts between parents and children that continue, as a result of the divorce and just kind of continuing drama, things like that. So I help people with those kinds of things, getting that clarity for themselves, that self-care. And, a lot of times divorce just prompts all this stress. People need to, their financial situation changes. They need to get a new job. They need to work 2 jobs. They're just burning out. And it might be, 2-3 years down the road, but they're just going, or they're carrying a lot of baggage. And, I help people to just kind of examine that and say, okay, what can I do to help myself? Or what professionals might be able to help me to deal with this, to get to a better place?
And I think with an objective eye, having been on the other side now, but also working with people and being somewhat detached from their situation, I've heard so often people say, I just want this to be over. And I think really, if you step back and objectively look at it, you want the stress, the emotion, those pieces to be over. The chances are that you want this to move in the direction it's going, getting divorced, because obviously things are not going well. But the question is, how do we make the best of it during and beyond? And I think that's a lot of what you're saying as well, which is important as well. So one last time, if you can share your email and information before we wrap up. And if you have any last thoughts, maybe we haven't covered something you'd like to, or just elaborate, whatever it might be.
Sure. So once again, you can contact me at my website, taraeisenhard.com. You can email me, tara@taraeisenhard.com. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I am on Twitter too, but I don't use it quite so much. And, if I could leave everybody with one thing today, it would be to just kind of shift that mindset around divorce. Getting divorced doesn't mean that you're a bad person or a bad parent or a bad partner. It's an evolution, not a dissolution. It's the end of something, but it's the beginning of something else. And it's okay to honor and celebrate and recognize that relationship served a purpose in your life. It made you who you are, and you're not going to stop being you. You're going to keep learning and you're going to keep growing. And sometimes that's an uncomfortable thing with the conflicts that arise, but it's always just an opportunity to continue to learn more about yourself and grow as a person.
That's true. And I think it gives you the opportunity to really grow beyond and sometimes take the shackles off, maybe sometimes where you were being held behind. So on the finance side, I can tell you it's easy to get into these situations and complicate them so much more through divorce and other situations as well. Tara, thank you for sharing your experiences, your insights in how to work with a divorce coach, how to thrive. And I think we covered quite a few other things here as well. There are so many considerations during a divorce, and having a coach can really bring clarity to the path and know which path even sometimes to take and improve your outcome. It's not an easy task under any circumstances at all. I'm Hirsch Sermon, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please do reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Please reach out with questions for me or for Tara Eisenhard, our guest today. I look forward to you joining me in 2 weeks. My guest will be collaborative law expert, mediator, and many more talents, Sandra Crawford, and I look forward to you guys tuning in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining us.